Lands will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on Fix Our Forests, advancing innovative technologies to improve forest management and prevent wildfires. I ask unanimous consent that the following members be allowed to participate in today's hearing from the dais. The gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, and the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Downing. Without objection, so ordered. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking minority member. I therefore ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted in accordance with Committee Rule 3, Parent O. Without objection, so ordered. I'll now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning to all of you, and for those of you that traveled all the way across our country, welcome here, as well as all of our guests. Today, the Subcommittee on Federal Lands meets to continue our work addressing the wildfire crisis gripping our nation's forests and to explore how the Fix Our Forests Act can help unlock technological innovation, cut red tape, and bring private sector tools and common sense solutions into our forests. So far this year, more than 1.6 million acres have already burned in catastrophic wildfires, and we are just now entering the height of the fire year. Meanwhile, in my district, my constituents are dealing with thick wildfire smoke drifting down from Canada. Hopefully, our northern neighbors can learn a thing or two today as well. Communities across the West and beyond are bracing for further devastation, much of which could be prevented with stronger federal integration with the private sector. Proactive forest management, and faster response enabled by modern technology. Many states, tribes, and local communities are already seeing results by adopting private sector innovations. In contrast, the federal government's approach to forest management remains outdated, inefficient, and overly focused on process rather than outcomes. Despite spending an average of $2.5 billion per year on wildfire, this crisis is only getting worse. That's because instead of investing in proactive prevention, we're spending all of that money on reactive suppression. Recent studies from UC Davis found that for every dollar we invest in forest management projects on federal lands, we save up to $7 on suppression costs. The math for the American taxpayer is simple. We can't afford to invest in suppression only. We need a new model, one that emphasizes common sense prevention, leverages private sector innovation, and empowers land managers to act. That's exactly what President Trump's new executive order entitled Empowering Common Sense Wildfire Prevention and Response is all about. This executive order, which was signed earlier this month, encourages technology-enabled, locally driven strategies for wildfire response and mitigation. This means enhancing state and local fire response capabilities through the deployment of real-time fire detection and situational awareness tools. It also means reducing bureaucratic barriers to accelerate the adoption of cutting-edge technologies and ensuring our brave firefighters have the most cutting-edge technology on the front lines of wildland fire. This aligns perfectly with the work DOGE has been doing since the start of the President Trump's administration, unleashing American growth by cutting regulations and adopting private sector innovation. The private sector is developing the tools. Let's use them. Whether it's drones that fly through thick smoke and high winds, AI models that predict fire behavior in real time, or remote sensors and camera networks that detect ignitions before they become infernos, each of these technologies plays a complementary role in confronting the wildfire crisis. But while private landowners and state agencies are putting these tools to work, the federal government is lagging. Why? Because bureaucratic procurement bottlenecks, as well as duplicative permitting and review processes, stifle the use of private sector innovation. Modern technology is transforming how we detect, model, and respond to wildfires. The Fix Our Forests Act helps scale that transformation. The Fix Our Forests Act gives federal land managers the tools and authorities they need to partner with the private sector in real time, expand access to technology, test beds, and enable the use of data-driven insights. And it's not just about firefighting. It's about smart planning, targeted treatments, and better decision-making that ultimately reduce risk and lower costs. Once again, America cannot afford to leave proven technology sitting on the shelf. This subcommittee and Republicans across the House remain committed to restoring federal forests, reducing fire risk, and protecting American communities. The right tools and partnerships, we can do that more efficiently, more safely, and at lower cost to the taxpayer. Thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today. I look forward to learning your ideas on how we can drive smarter, faster, and more effective wildfire prevention and response through innovation and reform. With that, I yield back and I recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Huffman, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, you had me right till the end. We totally agree that we need to move out of a reactive posture when it comes to fire safety, that we've got to become proactive, that we've got to embrace innovation, that we need all of these private, public, and local government and state government partnerships and tribal partnerships. And we are completely on the same page with so much of what you laid out in your opening statements. And then you got to the part where you said all of this aligns perfectly with what DOJ has been doing. And this is where I feel like sometimes we must be living on different planets, because the chaos, the indiscriminate cuts, the total hampering of our preparedness heading into this fire season because of everything, this wrecking ball that DOJ has brought to our federal land management agencies, including the Forest Service, is the opposite of what we need right now, so that our local partners, our partners in state government, our partners in the private sector have some stability to actually join us in doing this important work. We don't have the people to do a lot of this work, and I've heard that from people in the Forest Service and in these other agencies. Talking points do not manifest reality. So I'm glad we're talking about fire resiliency. We've had a lot of these hearings where we do this. I really always welcome our experts and the amazing people who work on the front lines to talk with us about what we need to do. But at some point, we've got to address this disconnect between the chaos. We've got federal budget proposals from this administration that eviscerate the very agencies that we keep saying we want to do all of these important things. Reality check is desperately needed so that we can align our rhetoric and our stated goals and desires with the reality of what's going on under this administration. But look, I have been encouraged to see real attention paid to modernizing wildfire detection technologies within the fire service, so many of these other things. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Technology alone, of course, is not a silver bullet. AI, drones, satellite imagery, these tools are great, but they're only effective if we have public systems and personnel to deploy them. If we want to prevent wildfires and manage them effectively, we have to pair innovation with robust investments in federal staffing and budgets for land management and wildfire agencies, as I've said. Unfortunately, back to the budget reality that we're dealing with, President Trump is proposing deep cuts for both staff and programs, including research, another disconnect with this stated interest in innovation and technology. And it's happening at a time when the Forest Service has already declared a preparedness level 3 due to forecasted fire risk and a depleted federal firefighting workforce thanks to Elon Musk and these DOJ cuts. We've discussed many times before this committee how healthy fire-adapted Western landscapes require fire to survive and to thrive. The use of prescribed fires, cultural burnings, proactive management can reduce the severity, frequency, and cost of wildfires. And emerging wildfire technology can empower our federal agency experts to determine which fires are safe to burn and which ones we need to contain. But again, tech alone won't replace smart, on-the-ground, science-based forest stewardship. And by the way, some of that tech costs money. You need resources to even deploy it. So we've got to meet the wildfire crisis where people live by investing in community resilience. Programs like the Collaborative Wildfire Risk Reduction Program and the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program are crucially important. They give communities tools to reduce wildfire risk, including clearing hazardous fuels, creating defensible space, and doing landscape scale planning. House Democrats have championed these investments through programs like the IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act. We have been successful in helping reduce risk and enhance wildfire preparedness across the wildland-urban interface through these investments, and we should continue on that path. That's why I have introduced H.R. 582, the Community Protection and Wildfire Resilience Act. It's a bipartisan bill to strengthen the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program and expand its scope to support home hardening and resilient construction. We saw tragically during the LA fires how a threat to one home can quickly become a threat to an entire neighborhood. That's why wildfire resilience must be a collective effort and a shared responsibility. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for having this hearing. To our witnesses, thanks for coming to Washington. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Let's hear from you, but let's also begin to bridge this disconnect between the rhetoric and the talking points and the investments and the realities of these agencies that we need to have the capacity to do all of this work. I yield back.
The ranking member yields, and I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Westerman, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Tiffany, for holding this important hearing today, and thank you to the witnesses all for being here. I believe this discussion is extremely timely, given President Trump's recent executive order on empowering common sense wildfire prevention and response, which highlighted the importance of accelerating the adoption of innovative technologies to address our wildfire and forest health crisis. As chairman of this committee, I've often talked about the need to advance policy that promotes access, focuses on conservation, increases new technology, and also spurs innovation. And I believe that the Fix Our Forest Act embodies all of these principles, but I'm excited today that we'll be focusing on the aspects of this legislation that incentivize new and innovative technologies. There is no downside to scaling new technologies across the federal government, especially innovative technologies that improve wildfire suppression and response and facilitate more proactive land management. With better data, faster detection, and smarter planning, agencies can treat more acres, lower wildfire severity, and better protect communities. But while wildfires are fast, the federal government's ability to adopt technologies has generally been woefully slow. We know that wildfires create fast-moving, complex conditions, and technology needs to evolve to keep pace with that. The new tools we have, like satellites, cameras, artificial intelligence, drones, geospatial and cloud-based software, and 5G networks, all have the potential to further reduce wildfire suppression costs and to improve forest management outcomes. But innovative technologies aren't just about being efficient and cutting costs, they're about saving lives. Let's take, for example, just this week out in Douglas County, Colorado, a lightning strike started on a U.S. Forest Service property, and thanks to AI-enabled cameras, my understanding is that crews were able to start attacking this fire in 30 minutes, and it was fully contained in less than 4 hours. Local emergency officials credited this technology with helping protect nearby homes. Without it, these officials said they wouldn't have been able to respond to the fire until it was too late or too large to do something about it. Instead of being another tragedy, families whose homes may have otherwise been at risk probably never knew that the fire even started that day. Another example of how technology has played a critical role in protecting communities in the wildland-urban interface is the Watch Duty app. During the devastating fires in Los Angeles earlier this year, millions of Americans downloaded an app on their phones that provided real-time updates on evacuations, fire containment, and suppression response. This app became so vital that local residents reported making evacuation decisions based on the information on Watch Duty because the data was high quality and reliable, again, probably saving countless lives. While both the Douglas County and the Watch Duty app examples are undoubtedly success stories, they both have one thing in common. These were private sector solutions that filled a critical gap due to the lack of federal leadership. The AI-enabled cameras that caught the fire that ignited on the federal lands weren't owned by the Forest Service, but were a partnership between Douglas County and local utilities. Residents of Los Angeles couldn't get up-to-the-minute updates from the National Alert System, so they turned to the Watch Duty app. The Fix Our Forest Act restores the federal government's leadership role in scaling these vital technologies by leveraging these private sector solutions. The bill creates a new test bed pilot project so we can see what technologies are working at a local level and scale those where appropriate. This pilot project, along with the creation of a new fireshed center, will also make sure new data and technologies adopted by federal, state, tribal, and local governments are interoperable and high quality, because we can't fight wildfires siloed by jurisdictional boundaries. As we discuss adopting new technology at the federal level, we cannot forget about the importance of upgrading technology for our brave wildland firefighters as well. For too long, we've sent federal wildland firefighters into unwinnable situations with outdated technology. Those who are on the front lines defending our communities and protecting our public lands shouldn't have to worry about whether or not their equipment is going to work properly. We can and should do better, and I commend President Trump for his leadership on this issue through his recent executive order. I want to thank our panel of witnesses for being with us today. Thank you for traveling to be here to provide your insights on this topic, a topic that is so critical for communities out west and the entire nation. I'm looking forward to highlighting the important technology provisions of FOFA as we work with our bipartisan counterparts in the Senate to get this legislation to the President's desk. Thank you again. I yield back.
Chairman yields. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Neguse, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Tiffany, and of course, Chairman Westerman and Ranking Member Huffman. Today's hearing is another important opportunity to continue our discussion about responding to our nation's wildfire crisis. Hotter, drier, and more extreme conditions have made fire seasons longer and more severe in my home state of Colorado and throughout the country. Of course, we know a big reason why is climate change, which I understand my colleagues don't like it when we reference climate change here, but the ranking member and I will continue to do so, and it's important in the context of this hearing that we address it as well. As members of this subcommittee know, my district in particular has experienced devastating wildfires in the last few years, and I am unfortunately far from alone in that experience, as I know many of my colleagues have also dealt with these disasters. As we sit here right now in Washington, D.C., we're experiencing an extreme heat wave. Conditions like this are unfortunately the new normal, and they are accelerating wildfire risk all over the country. I agree with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that the federal government should do more to encourage the development and the adoption of new technology to assist with wildfire detection and enhance community safety. There's plenty of common ground on that point, and appreciate the continued attention to the issue of wildfire from my colleagues on this committee. For decades, the United States has used new technology to help detect wildfires. In the 1920s, we started with aircraft, moving eventually to satellites, drones, and air sensors, and it certainly makes sense to incorporate artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies into our efforts to address pervasive wildfires. But, and it's an important but, I believe that these investments in new technology have to be matched with two things. First, we cannot forget that wildfire detection technologies will not work without sufficient agency personnel. Effective wildfire technology requires people to monitor it, staff who can review AI analyses and algorithms, and then make the call as to whether or not to send firefighters out to the field. As we all know, the Trump administration, in the name of what they described as government efficiency, has gutted wildfire prevention programs impacting federal wildland firefighters across the government, particularly at the Forest Service. 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of the Interior, Mr. Burgum, sat where our witnesses today are sitting and could not tell me the number of how many red card holding employees, that is to say, fire-trained professionals who support wildfire operations, have left his agency since the beginning of the year. He could not answer that question, and we haven't gotten an answer since. And I'm not the only one who's concerned about the safety of our communities during these hot summer months. In addition, the President's budget proposal for fiscal year 26 hollows out the Forest Service, the very agency that addresses wildland fire in the United States. So it's a bit rich to me, Mr. Chairman, to have this hearing as we discuss new technologies while the Forest Service's budget for research, for example, is completely zeroed out, emptied for the next fiscal year, forcing them to close up the new technologies that the witnesses, I presume, are here to talk about. So I would hope that the chairman and my colleagues on the other side would bring the same level of passion that they have expressed today during the hearing for new technologies towards supporting the core federal programs that would enable these technologies to be implemented. Finally, I would just note that we have to be more strategic about the deployment of firefighters and available suppression resources. And I know that our witnesses will talk about the new technologies that I think can help us do some science-based risk assessments that allow us to make more informed decisions as to where there are risks and where there are opportunities for managing fire on the land. We are lucky, I will say, to have Tyson Bertone-Riggs testifying today. He was one of the staff co-leads for the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. It's an example of the kind of bipartisan consensus-building work that can be done in this space. The commission published a report, thorough, comprehensive, and many of those recommendations are now being pursued legislatively by both sides of the aisle here in Congress, and I'm proud to be a part of that effort. And perhaps in a future legislative hearing, we might be able to entertain several of the bills that have been introduced to implement those recommendations. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you to the ranking member, Mr. Neguse, and we're now going to move on to witness testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that under committee rules, you must limit your oral opening statement to 5 minutes, but your entire statement will appear in the hearing record. To begin your testimony, please press the on button on the microphone. We use timing lights. When you begin, the light will turn green. At the end of 5 minutes, the light will turn red, and I'll ask you to please complete your statement. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Karen Howard, Director of Science and Technology Assessment at the Government Accountability Office. Dr. Howard, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tiffany, Ranking Member Neguse, Chair Westerman, and Ranking Member Huffman, and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to be here today to discuss technologies that can assist with wildfire forecasting, detection, mitigation, and response. While many factors contribute to the nation's readiness to respond to wildfires, current and emerging technologies such as satellites, aircraft and drones, cameras, sensors, and AI have the potential to offer significant improvements. Some of these technologies have been widely adopted, while others are still in development. For example, satellites have been used for decades to gather data on terrain, the moisture content of trees and brush, weather that can affect the likelihood and behavior of a fire, and hotspots that may indicate active fire or smoldering areas. Satellite data can be used for wildfire forecasting and to detect and monitor active fires, especially in remote locations that can be difficult to monitor otherwise. However, detecting and tracking fires from space can have limitations, including low spatial resolution, potential interference from clouds for some satellite sensors, and data lags that can slow response. Aircraft and drones have also been used in many ways, including inspecting utility power lines to prioritize where to focus maintenance and mitigation efforts, high-resolution mapping of terrain and accessibility, and collecting real-time information on a fire's location and its potential to spread. Aircraft and drones can be mobilized quickly and cover large areas. However, aircraft flights can be expensive, and smoke and active fire conditions pose a risk to pilots. Drones offer safety, cost, and data collection advantages, but may last just a few years, especially in hazardous conditions. And unauthorized civilian drone use near active fires has hindered active wildfire response. Ground-based cameras and sensors in or near wildlands can monitor for smoke or fire in real time. A more recent development is to arrange them in networks within areas of high fire risk and incorporate the use of AI to enable faster detection and response. For example, last year, Hawaiian Electric began deploying high-resolution video cameras with AI for early detection of wildfires. And last fall, the Air Force deployed sensors to monitor over 1,000 acres at the Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. However, cameras and sensors have some challenges, including range limitations, the labor required to install them in remote locations, and the need for calibration to ensure accuracy. AI, and specifically machine learning, is increasingly used in the U.S. to enhance the ability of models to forecast potential wildfire risk and improve wildfire detection and response. For example, in 2023, a program called Alert California was launched to detect wildfires using AI and images from over 1,100 cameras statewide. This system provides 24-hour monitoring with night vision capabilities, and the program reports that it detected over 1,200 confirmed fires in 2023, including in remote locations where human spotters are more likely to miss them. Digital twins are another AI tool in early development that could use the data collected by wildfire technologies to improve detection and response. However, despite the potential of AI to enhance wildfire modeling and response, there are limitations. As with most AI applications, large amounts of high-quality data are required to train the algorithms for proper response, but this could be costly and time-consuming. In addition, historical data are limited for extreme or outlier events, which reduces the accuracy of AI in forecasting extreme fires. Continued testing of such systems, especially in operational environments, and more training could help improve understanding and trust among potential users. We identified several options that could help policymakers address challenges with wildfire technologies, including considering what combination of technologies could most cost-effectively manage wildfire risks, updating educational requirements to include more AI-related coursework, closing data gaps, and establishing guidelines for making data AI-ready. In conclusion, a range of current and emerging technologies could enhance the ability to forecast and respond to wildfires if we can effectively address the challenges to their development and deployment. This concludes my prepared statement, and I would be happy to respond to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, be allowed to participate in today's hearing from the dais. Without objection, so ordered. I'll now recognize Ms. Allison Wolff, Chief Executive Officer of Vibrant Planet. Ms. Wolff, welcome, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tiffany and other members here, thank you for having me today. I'm truly honored to be here. So I am CEO and co-founder of Vibrant Planet. We are a team of scientists, land managers, and technology leaders that have come together to build a state-of-the-art wildfire risk mitigation platform. It supports wildfire analytics and decision support that helps with budget prioritization and tree and house level planning to rapidly mitigate wildfire risk. It's a common operating picture that is used pre-fire by the agencies, just like we have during a live fire operation. This is an animation produced by Navteca using NASA data. It shows the actual fire movement that happened in Altadena, California, one of the 2 big fires that broke out on January 7th in Los Angeles. About 9,400 structures were lost. We also lost 19 lives. Another 1,000 structures were damaged to the tune of about $40 billion in insured losses. Go ahead. After that fire, we did a post-fire analysis to look at whether treatments would have made a difference in mitigating that risk. So the red line here is the same footprint of that fire, the actual footprint. We have the same weather, same conditions that day built into our fire model. That post-fire analysis shows that an investment of only $9 million in risk mitigation treatments, the green areas on the map along the wild urban interface between the National Forest and the city of Altadena, would have slowed the fire down enough to give firefighters enough time to more safely and more effectively defend the community of Altadena. That would have potentially avoided that loss of $40 billion. Getting ahead of these fires to mitigate risk is absolutely crucial, and that is why we built our platform at Vibrant Planet. The platform is deployed in about 75 million acres across 8 states. Also, after the fire, we did an analysis and looked at how many communities look just like Altadena in that 98th to 100th percentile of fire risk where fire is imminent. So on this map, the red dots represent 300 communities in that very, very high risk category of fire likelihood. Since we created this map, as some of you noted, several communities have burned. We lost 165 structures in Dalles, Oregon last week. And just this week, in the last few days, we've lost structures in Utah, New Mexico, and Nevada. These communities are in your states, and risk mitigation in these places needs to happen right now. The problem is that today, without modern tools like ours, it can take 3, 5, even 10 years to get to an implementation plan. Often the data is low quality, and collaborators are often planning on paper, literally like in this picture. Plans are often obsolete by the time they hit print because the landscape has burned. Often they are litigated, which slows things down. Millions of dollars are spent on these plans using people's time that just goes down the drain. So as a product leader, I saw a dire need to harness modern technology to streamline and improve planning processes with much better information. And if we don't move faster, again, we will lose more communities. So at Vibrant Planet, we've developed a very simple, straightforward application to help local, state, and federal agencies, plus their NGO partners and utilities, scenario plan in real time to develop specific tree and house level plans that they can coordinate across jurisdictions. Our platform helps groups get to a final plan in days versus years, and with less conflict and more confidence than I've ever seen happen in public land management. We work with the Forest Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, CAL FIRE, communities, and then utilities like PG&E. So again, we're deployed in 75 million acres in 8 states. Used at national scale, we estimate that our platform could save up to $240 million per year in taxpayer dollars, just in planning efficiencies alone, and that doesn't count the trillions of dollars of avoided losses that the platform could potentially keep intact if you think about public health, wildfire smoke impacts, water impacts, timber losses, recreation economy losses across the West. And then we also heard from Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve yesterday about the pending insurance and mortgage crisis. So one of the big breakthroughs that we at Vibrant Planet have made technologically is to map every tree in the Western US. Using AI, we can see current conditions and risk. And then if you go to our platform, this is just a very quick demo. This is our actual system. So this is a deployment near Carson City, Nevada, just east of Lake Tahoe. So customers use the system to assess fire risk in their area of interest. They can then tell the system the outcomes they want. So this person is optimizing a plan for protecting assets and municipal drinking water. They then enter the available budget that they have into the platform, and then the system is generating a set of prioritized projects sequenced in order of risk mitigation. And then it provides, when you click into a project, parcel scale efficiency evaluation. So what is the actual return on investment of that particular project? And then it gives you the very specific treatment mix. So mechanical thinning, prescribed fire, deploying goats to eat vegetation.
I'll have to ask you to wrap it up if you.
Yes, I'm nearly done. In closing, new technology like ours can help right now to accelerate coordinate actions across the United States to keep these communities intact. And I'll just say that the amazing people that are still in these agencies, they have an astounding amount of change happening right now. But the public still expects the same kind of risk mitigation. So they're operating in this horrific increase of catastrophic fire. So they need to know that you all will have their back as they take this leap into a new modern era of land management and fire risk mitigation. Those are all my comments. I'm looking forward to questions.
Yeah, we'll get some questions here to be able to get all that out, because I know you've got a lot of information to share. Thank you, Ms. Wolff. I now recognize Mr. Sean Triplett, Data Integration and Operations Lead at Earth Fire Alliance. Mr. Triplett, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. Again, Sean Triplett, Earth Fire Alliance. Thank you, Chairman Westerman, Tiffany, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on a topic that has been a focus of mine throughout my career. I also want to thank the men and women from federal, state, local, and tribal organizations who are currently engaged on the front lines fighting fires. These men and women are the heart, soul, and backbone of our nation's wildfire community. Their tireless efforts, dedication, and commitment to public service should never be forgotten or diminished. The nation's currently at PL3. We have fires burning across multiple geographic areas, and we also are including support to Canada. What a fortuitous time to be at the nation's capital discussing wildfires as they impact every state in the union. I spent over 20 years as a wildland firefighter, as a grunt on a fire crew, to managing fire intelligence programs at incident command posts, to working at the National Interagency Fire Center as a tools and technology lead for the Forest Service. Over my career, I built long-standing programs such as the Enterprise Geospatial Portal and the Fire Guard program to enhance situational awareness to firefighters and staff. However, I did struggle with bureaucracy, fractured leadership structures, disconnected information technology systems, and their associated budget processes. These were difficult times to implement programs such as firefighter tracking, last mile connectivity, and artificial intelligence. I'm pleased to see that the Fix Our Forest Act has a goal of modernizing wildfire technology. My hope is that Congress continues to support these acts. While at NIFC, I co-led a national effort that was tasked to identify gaps in our ability to detect and monitor wildfires. We concluded that the wildfire community lacked a consistent, persistent system to identify and track wildfires or prescribed fires in real time. As a result of that study, we did make investments at the federal, state, local, and tribal levels to deploy fixed camera systems, integrated new airborne sensors, and even tested experimental platforms such as stratospheric balloons. However, today, we still lack that nationwide reliable system that can not only detect, but provide fire characterization information that's critical when you're calibrating fire spread models and understanding the impacts they have as they burn across the landscape. That brings me to the FireSat constellation that's been developed through the Earthfire Alliance. We're a global nonprofit of public-private partnerships with entities such as Google, Muon Space, and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. Similar to NIFC, these organizations also conducted a study asking what technology and data gaps do we have in understanding wildland fire. Surprisingly, they came to the same conclusion that we did at NIFC. We are lacking a system to detect, monitor, and characterize fires across the nation. With FireSat, we've designed a system to give firefighters and emergency managers across the U.S. real-time detection and monitoring capabilities. This is just not theory. We have a satellite up, designed, built, and launched in less than 12 months. With our full constellation, we will be able to detect and monitor fires across the entire United States every 20 minutes, giving firefighters an unprecedented view and a greater understanding of fires on our landscape. But let's get beyond the tech. I want to emphasize how this was possible. It was done through public-private partnerships. These partnerships are not just useful, they're essential for the future so that we can rapidly prototype, de-risk innovation, and stretch our limited and state resources for technology. The Fix Our Forests Act is a vital step forward by encouraging innovation, establishing fire risk reduction programs, and adopting technology. The establishment of the Fireshed Indoor Intelligence Center should lay the foundation for an organization that can implement technology programs that not are specific to an agency mission, but support the nation as a whole. The Fix Our Forests Act lays the groundwork for a more resilient, better prepared nation to address the wildfire crisis. Wildfire does not respect boundaries, and in today's landscape, where fire seasons are longer, more intense, and destructive, we need to act nationally. We need to foster interagency collaboration and act now. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Triplett. I now recognize Mr. Tyson Bertone-Riggs, founder and managing director of the Alliance for Wildfire Resilience. Mr. Bertone-Riggs, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, ranking members. I'm here today, representing the Alliance for Wildfire Resilience, but my organization looks to the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission and its recommendations as the source of policy change related to wildfire. As everyone here is painfully aware, wildfires have tremendous impacts on public safety, health, natural resources, and the environment. Wildfires impact the entire nation and thus demand national action, and I appreciate your attention to the issue today. I've been asked here today to speak to the important role that technology can play in helping to reduce wildfire risk. The Wildfire Commission found that new approaches to wildfire are urgently needed. These include modernization of the science, data, and technology we use to support those efforts. Fortunately, we have policy solutions to significantly improve our ability to utilize new technology. We can accomplish this change through 4 major changes: create a centralized fire environment center, modernize contracting and procurement, improve research coordination, and provide sufficient funding and staffing for the job. While much of the technology to meet critical needs in the wildfire space already exists, the decentralized approach of multiple agencies responsible for wildfire management and suppression limits the ability to procure and integrate these new technologies. The Commission found that centralization of technology efforts would provide more effective support to decision makers on the ground. More specifically, the Commission recommended development of a joint office to reimagine our approach to science, data, and technology. This joint office, which the Commission referred to as a Fire Environment Center, is critical to our ability to provide integrated decision support and predictive services. The Commission envisioned a real-time, data-rich, common operating environment that could provide the best available information to firefighters and land managers and enable them to make more informed and effective decisions. Importantly, the Fire Environment Center, as envisioned by the Commission, is not another coordinating body, but rather a centralized, modern approach to service provision. It's also important to recognize, though, that it should include representation from non-federal entities who play critical roles in the system and allow a two-way street of access to information and tools. The Fix Our Forests Act, particularly the Senate version, would take major steps in this direction, creating a joint office similar to the one envisioned by the Commission, and we're happy to see it included. Second, changes are needed to contracting and procurement processes to better onboard new private sector technologies into the wildfire system. Too often, critical tools are left unused for too long as cumbersome agency procurement processes slow their adoption and dispersal. In addition, lack of certainty around timelines and processes can disincentivize contractors from investing in improved safety and delivery systems. The Commission noted the Department of Defense contracting authorities could potentially serve as models for these improvements. Third, we can improve research. Rather than calling for increased centralization of research, the Commission noted the value of a collaborative approach to research, more capable of effectively disseminating information to managers and more coordinated with respect to research priorities. Research priorities can and should be informed by practitioners on the ground to ensure that we are investing in answers to the questions that our firefighters and land managers need. For this reason, AWR is pleased to support the Wildfire Coordination Act, which would make critical improvements to the research to operations pathway. While aspects of Fix Our Forests provide a solid organizational base from which to work, acquisition of new technology and advancing research will ultimately require appropriate staff and funding. Yes, modern technology carries costs, but the costs of not investing are far greater. The Commission was clear that inaction with respect to wildfire is the most expensive choice of all. While there's room for improvement in how we approach staffing, we do need to rebuild the capacity to deliver these services. Finally, as we discuss technology, it's important to identify its appropriate role inside the system. Technology can help us quickly detect fires in remote areas, improve decision-making through modeling, and better track progress towards outcomes. Technology can also play an important role in mitigation in the built and natural environments, which the Commission and previous studies have shown to be more effective, cost-effective than suppression alone. However, we shouldn't think of new technology as a silver bullet that can render all fires suppressible. We absolutely, critically need better tools and technology in the wildfire system, but these tools are necessary not because they enable us to remove fire from our world, but because they allow us to make informed, sound decisions about when, where, and how fire is applied. Fire is also a tool, perhaps one of our oldest tools, and it has a role to play in how we reduce risk to our communities and landscapes. Thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bertone-Riggs. Finally, I'd like to welcome back to the committee Mr. Dan Munsey, Fire Chief of the San Bernardino County Fire Protection District. Chief Munsey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. It's so valuable going last because a lot of the great statements have been made, and I think you did a wonderful job. And listening to your opening remarks, Mr. Tiffany, you understand the problem, you understand the available technology, you understand what we could be doing. So I struggle with what I'm going to say to you. I'm a firefighter, and I love fighting fires. It's the greatest thing I've ever done, is to be able to help people in time of need. Huge wildfires, frankly, are really good for business. They're good for budgets. They're good for our PR. But I'm very pleased with the title of this subcommittee hearing, which is Advancing Innovative Tech to Improve Forest Management and Prevent Wildfire. You see, I firmly believe that this nation does not have a wildland fire crisis. It has a wildland management crisis. The technology that exists today, we don't have a technology problem in the United States to combat wildfire. We have a technology adoption problem in the fire service. San Bernardino County is the largest fire protection district in the nation. We're the largest county. We have the largest amount of federal land in our jurisdiction. We have the largest amount of responses on the federal land. The impacts from the decisions made in natural resources are felt by us. We respond to 150,000 incidents per year. That makes us amongst the busiest in the nation. We're proud of that. But as a fire chief, I recognize that's 150,000 failures because it's my job to prevent bad stuff from happening. But I can't do that alone because I can't just do it on local government. I need to do it in partnership on the federal and the state areas. So what I tell you, what I want to tell you is how to efficiently respond to large wildfires, because I love that so much. I was incident management teams for over a decade doing this. I love the common sense approach that President Trump has taken. I want to talk a little bit about that. So first, I want to point out we are the very best 1990 wildland firefighters in the world. It's a misnomer when people say the United States are the most technologically advanced and the best firefighters. We're just simply not. The firefighters on the ground lack the basic technology that exists today in your hands. When they go home, they have the ability, the Dingle Act 2019 required us to track firefighters. To date, we're not even doing that. Yet on my iPhone, I can find my friend and families and have been doing it for 11 years. We lack a collective vision. We lack interagency department collaboration. It's very bifurcated. I fully support President Trump and his creation of the U.S. Wildfire Agency. We have to break down the barriers. We are slow to innovate. We are burdened by the regulatory process. We are hampered by lengthy bureaucratic procurement processes. We lack access to the fundamental tools. Next slide. Does it strike you the United States is home to the largest concentration of wildland-focused private capital, startup company, researchers, test beds in the world, yet we're not adopting the tech? And it's because of this lack of vision. JFK got in front of the nation in 1961 and said we're going to put a man on the moon. And people thought he was absolutely crazy. But we did it 8 years later. We advanced the technology to do it. In San Bernardino County, we're not accepting the metric we've used for years that we're going to keep wildfire tech 10 acres or less, 10 square acres or less, 90% of the time. We are working hard to keep it 10 square feet or less by advancing early detection and early response using robotics. Next slide. So what is the current status? Lack of data connectivity to even use this technology, lack of the interagency operability, lack of a common operating picture. We have common operating pictures on our phones. Most of you use them to drive around. We don't look at paper maps anymore. Lack of artificial intelligence. And with artificial intelligence, we have to talk about sustained situational awareness. Next slide. So what are the 4 things we should be concentrating to prevent fires, which is vegetation and fire spread modeling? And I want to acknowledge Fireside and Jason Brooks for doing a great job of creating a product that allows the community to self-report and harden the structures. I want to recognize John Mills from Watch Duty that created an app for free so the public can be better informed in their decision-making. We need to have better effective fuel management using technologies like BurnBot, which is essentially a mobile incinerator that's able to incinerate with clean air and remove the fuels. We need early detection, rapidized and organized response, frankly, from trained, well-trained firefighters like a SEAL Team 6 of firefighters to respond to these emergencies and extinguish emerging fires. Next slide. These are some of the technology that's up there. That's Trident that sits underneath the aircraft, can immediately give you real-time fire perimeter. Next slide. This is here at Common Operating Platforms. I want to point out that the Angeles National Forest is the only forest that is tracking vehicles, not firefighters yet, and they do that because San Bernardino County pays for the technology because they can't pay for it out of their federal budgets. Next slide. Terrestrial cameras are robust, but the federal government hasn't invested in any terrestrial cameras. Next slide.
We'll need to wrap up here,
Thank you.
Chief Munsey.
This is an example of sustained aerial awareness that's available that we're not using. Next slide. Finally, this is an autonomous drone that San Bernardino County is developing with RAIN. This is all local government that's doing that. The answer to this isn't the technology that's widely available. The answer is leadership. We need clear delineation of leadership between these wildfire agencies and landowners to advance technology. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Chief Munsey. Before we get to questions, first I'd like to recognize Mr. Stauber for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record the United States Department of Agricultural press release dated June 21st of 2025, where where Secretary Rollins has stated the United States Forest Service has hired 96% of its 11,300 firefighting hiring target, with fully staffing anticipated by mid-July, and that this is ahead of where the agency has been in previous years. The U.S. Forest Service is operationally ready for the fire season ahead. And I yield back.
That was 96%.
96% of its 11,300 firefighters.
So ordered. And now I'd like to go into questioning of our witnesses. First, I turn to the chairman, Mr. Westerman, for his questions.
Thank you to all the witnesses for your excellent testimony today. This is a subject that I could personally probably ask you questions for an hour or so, but I got to be much more brief than that. Chief Munsey, in your written testimony, you highlighted how federal wildland firefighters still rely on paper maps and radios dating back even to the 1930s. I was recently back home, and I've got an engineering background, but I think I've lost a lot of those skills working here in Congress. But I was out looking for a property corner, and I pulled up Google Earth on my phone and was able to use the compass on my phone and Google Earth and walked right up on this pin in the ground. And I was amazed at that technology that, like you said, is available on our phones. It's mind-boggling that we're still relying on paper maps and old radios for our wildland firefighters. And I know President Trump's executive order addresses some of that, but from a boots-on-the-ground perspective, what technologies would you say are most urgently needed but underutilized by our federal agencies?
So early detection, again, it's an ecosystem. There needs to be satellites. We need to have better access to military-grade satellites. We need persistent drones, solar drones that are literally sitting up there with high-resolution cameras and sensors. We need better terrestrial camera systems like Alert Wildfire. We need better sensors that have been identified by some of my colleagues. We're working with Fire Neural Network to identify where lightning strikes are occurring in dry weather that start fires. Early detection is critical. Early response using robotics. If we wait for someone to see the smoke and then we get in the fire engine, then we drive to the fire, and by the way, it's probably going to be in a roadless inventory area. We're not even going to be able to make access. These fires are growing very big. We need to be able to respond with robotics to suppress and control these fires and then follow up by boots on the ground. There's a lack of common operating picture between agencies. Local government, for the most part, has adopted various technologies that allow us to visualize each other's incidents, allow us to visualize where our resources is, our command structure, what our goals and objectives, and they give us real-time information. I have Jeff Alexi behind me for our robotics division, who's integrated drones into our common operating picture. None of that exists in the federal government. When I'm on an incident management team and I respond out in operations, I am handed a paper map. Sometimes I create those paper maps. They're often very dated. They could be days old. They could be at least 12 hours old. And then as I go out in the line, you know what I do? I take colored markers with me so I can draw on that fire line, and I've just updated my map. But nobody else knows what I'm seeing unless I get on that land mobile radio, which is technology from the 1930s, and I report it in, or I look for a cell signal to be able to call it in. But our situational awareness is not common. There's not the integration. There's not these products in the federal government wildfire response agencies.
Yeah, it sounds like the same technology implementation for the air traffic control system, which is way behind as well. Just another example. Common sense would tell us that implementing this technology is going to do a lot of really positive things. It's going to save lives, number one. It's going to save property. It's going to reduce the cost that the federal government spends on fighting fires. It's going to help have a healthier environment. I mean, seems like a no-brainer that we would implement this technology. And Ms. Wolff, in your testimony, you estimated an incredible $1.2 billion in projected savings by scaling technology like Vibrant Planet's platform across the federal government. Again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but can you expand on how the Fireshed Center created in FOFA will help recognize the savings?
Yes, we're big fans of the Fire Center. And I think where companies like ours play into that, where we can continue to have R&D budgets inside government, companies like ours can operationalize some of the science that comes out of government agencies and put it into the hands of people that are making decisions. That creates a great number of efficiencies. So for example, to date, our system, the deployments that I showed, the federal government has spent about $5.8 million with us. And I estimate that that has saved it's about a $300 million return if you break that down in terms of workforce efficiencies, like I talked about, but then also the avoided structure loss that's over and above what is possible without a system that prioritizes as precisely as our system can do. So we can work with across the new fire center where the Forest Service will likely come under the Department of Interior. We can be the common operating picture, like I said, pre-fire for risk mitigation across Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and some of the other agencies, parks, et cetera, but then also the remaining Forest Service to make sure that they are all operating with the same common data and the same types of efficiencies to target treatments to support the timber executive order, as well as some of the fuels treatment mitigation. Those things need to be connected. So that's where technology can really help be that connective tissue and common operating picture up front.
Thank you. And Mr. Triplett, I was going to, I'm way past time, but I was going to ask you to, you talked about the economic benefits too, so we may want to follow up with some written questions on that. I yield back.
As promised, the chairman has a very hard time stopping on this issue. And, but thank you for your questions. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Neguse, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to note, with respect to the gentleman, my good friend from Minnesota, and his unanimous consent request regarding the Department of Agriculture. This came up during the hearing with Secretary Burgum, and I want to be very clear. The questions to Secretary Burgum were about the Interior Department's firefighting capacity, not the Forest Service. In 2024, the Interior Department employed, this time in 2024, July of 2024, 4,830 wildfire personnel. Or excuse me, my apologies, 5,780 wildfire personnel. This year, of course, Secretary Burgum would not answer the question when he testified, but he later provided an answer, his office rather, to the press, that the Department of Interior is employing 4,830 wildfire personnel. So those aren't my numbers. The Department of Interior is employing nearly 1,000 less wildfire personnel, including red card holders, than it was last year. I understand the Department of Agriculture's component piece, to your point, 96% towards their goal, but the Department of Interior is woefully behind, and that was the basis for the questions of Secretary Burgum. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here and certainly appreciate the focus on new technologies, and I agree with each of the witnesses about the necessity for the federal government to do far more in that regard. Chief, I read your written testimony and appreciated your verbal testimony, and welcome back to Washington, as I know you testified previously before our subcommittee. And I'm aghast at reading some of what you've described in terms of the fact that our firefighters don't have access to real-time monitoring data and the type of technology that citizens every day take for granted in their iPhones. So we've got to do more on that front, and I think there's some consensus here on that front. I guess one question for you, Chief, is I wonder if you are you concerned at all about the broader cuts to firefighting from a federal perspective, some of the programs that I know local fire departments in my district in Colorado rely on? Can you give us a sense of, because while I agree and appreciate your commitment to the new technologies, I am concerned about some of those funding cuts, and I guess I wonder if you are.
Sir, I'm going to focus on leadership. I think that you can fully hire every individual's wildfires, but unless you give them the tools for the job, you're going to decrease their efficiency and their ability to do the job. In San Bernardino, over the last few years, we've had about half of our federal U.S. Forest Service stations open at a given time, 25 in the San Bernardino National Forest, and there are about 12 staff. That does put a burden on the local government. The status today, I fully support our partners. I fully support the Empowering Common Sense and Wildfire Response. I fully support the U.S. Wildland Fire Service. I believe that there's a lot of efficiencies that can be achieved by combining the wildfire agencies. I believe that there's a lot of efficiencies can be found with technology.
One thing that sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I just have limited time, only about a minute left. Because I agree with you about the the capacity of the Forest Service in terms of offices and closures are not being fully staffed, and that's certainly an issue in my district. I guess I should have asked a more particular question. So just by way of example, the fiscal year 26 budget proposes a $646 million cut for FEMA grant programs. And it is unclear as to whether or not those will extend, just by way of example, to the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program. San Bernardino County has received, I think, $1 million in 2023 for firefighter health, $200,000 the year before. I can tell you fire departments in my district, I represent 12 counties, huge district that's larger than 8 states in western Colorado. A lot of my local fire departments rely on these Assistance to Firefighter grants. And so that's really what I'm asking is, are you concerned about those programs being potentially zeroed out or cut to such a degree? It's not personnel. These are support programs for firefighters like yourself and your people on the front lines.
I'm very grateful for the support of the federal government with our firefighters. Just for full awareness, I've asked for CSR to be about where the money goes, because believe that a lot of the money is stovepiped into areas that it shouldn't be in, and that money could be reallocated. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I appreciate your answer. I would just say, and I appreciate the chairman's indulgence, and again, appreciate your testimony and all the witnesses, but we're talking about a lot of local grant funds. I looked through some of these assistance to firefighting grants that impacted my district. I took a look through some of those in Southern California. They're really important. They matter, certainly to my fire chiefs. And I just think, while I appreciate the focus on technology, and I agree, we've got to find more efficiencies, we've got to be more innovative, but we also should not lose sight of the necessity of these programs for our smaller fire departments, rural areas. So I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing's focused on innovative technologies to prevent wildfires and better manage our lands, but I think this is for naught if there isn't a dramatic change in our fundamental approach to forest management and wildfire prevention. It's not a lack of technology that's destroying our forests, it's a lack of common sense. And I certainly endorse Chief Munsey's testimony in full. I'd remind the Democrats that the Forest Service was once not only self-supporting, it was revenue generating for the Treasury. Federal timber auctions not only produce sustainable, fire-resilient forests by removing excess timber before it could choke off the forest and burn, they also produced revenues for both the federal government and for the local communities impacted by the federal lands. It was leftist environmental laws that made forest management endlessly time-consuming and ultimately cost-prohibitive. So we stopped carrying out excess timber, and now nature is returned to burn it out. We've lost 25% of our federal forests in the last 10 years to catastrophic fire. Now, private landowners still maintain healthy, resilient forests, and they make money doing it. The federal government now keeps its forests in decrepit condition and loses money doing it. And I want to assure the ranking member that you can often tell the boundaries between private and federal lands just by the conditions of the forests on each side of the boundary line. How clever of the climate to know exactly where the boundaries are and only to decimate the public lands. The paleontologists tell us in pre-Columbian times, California lost between 4 and 12 million acres a year to catastrophic fire, and that was in a cooler climate than we have today. Modern forest management and fire suppression reduced this to just 250,000 acres a year throughout the 20th century. But when we stopped this practice, our forests have again returned to become morbidly overgrown. In 2020, we were back up to 4 million acres lost to catastrophic fire. That's not a new normal. That is the old normal returning because we've abandoned our responsibility to manage our lands. For many years, a group called Alert Tahoe, led by Dr. Graham Kent, raised money for cameras in the Tahoe Basin to spot fires at their outset before they could get out of control. And yet he complained to me that the 2 biggest impediments he faces in placing these cameras is not money, it's not technology, it's roadblocks caused by the National Environmental Policy Act and the California Environmental Quality Act. It also seems to me that early detection is useless if it's not acted upon. On July 4th, 2021, lightning started a small fire in Alpine County. The local fire crew that responded was told by the Forest Service to stand down. The Forest Service sent a helicopter out every day to take pictures for its Facebook page, but it never once dropped a bucket of water to put the fire out. 12 days later, it exploded out of control, and it destroyed 70,000 acres of forest land. Meanwhile, in my legislation, H.R. 178, to make immediate extinguishment of fires when they're first discovered, still sits in this committee. And Mr. Chairman, I would renew my plea for this committee to mark it up and pass it without further delay. So my question is pretty simple. What good is cutting-edge technology to manage our forests and combat wildfire if we're not willing to use it? Chief Munsey?
Thank you, sir. I think you're reiterating the point that we need leadership in this space. I agree with you that we should extinguish all fires. People want to make the argument that good fire is necessary for the environment. I completely agree. But good fire should be an intentionally set where you have holding forces in the right conditions. You should not allow a fire to go uncontrolled. And while you believe it can be good fire, the problem is you can quickly find yourself in another national preparedness level, PL5, where you no longer have the resources to control that fire, and it can grow to large proportions.
We used to have the 10 a.m. rule, which was that fires that were discovered would be extinguished by 10 a.m. the next morning at the latest, and that seemed to work. It seemed a lot more efficient to extinguish 100 small fires before they could explode out of control than to try to fight one major fire that's consuming hundreds of thousands of acres of land.
Sir, I'd fire the guys behind me if they allowed the fire to go past 10 a.m.
I'm sorry, say again?
I said I'd fire the guys behind me
Yeah.
if they allowed a fire to go past 10 a.m.
The Forest Service says we were monitoring the fire. My response to that is, who in his right mind would monitor a rattlesnake in your bedroom just because it wasn't doing anything at the moment? You'd kill the rattlesnake before it could cause harm. And that's what our fire departments are dedicated to doing, and that's the common sense we seem to have lost with our federal agencies. So thank you for your testimony today.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I'll recognize Ms. Randall for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our witnesses today. My district is home to coastal forests and lowland forests, temperate rainforests, mountain forests, the Olympic National Park, and the Olympic National Forest. In short, we have a lot of moss, forest land, and 200-year-old trees that need protection from a fire season that is increasing in length and severity. As we speak in the Senate, Republican members of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee are doubling down on their efforts to sell public lands like those in my district. And in September 2023, there were 7 fires burning 3,500 acres in Olympic National Park. It seems obvious that as technologies emerge to prevent wildfires on public lands like the Olympic National Park, we must have public land protections that allow agencies to perform preventative management of fires like those that devastate communities. And this isn't just an issue that for those of us who live near rural public lands. Wildfires, as we saw in the testimony about Los Angeles, and we see every year, are increasingly encroaching on urban areas. And we need to protect our public lands, not sell them off, to ensure that we can prevent increasing emergencies. I've met with Forest Service firefighters who have fought these fires on the Olympic Peninsula and who have had to move states to find other jobs after their positions were terminated by the Trump administration. We shouldn't be putting ourselves in a weaker position to defend our public lands from increasing forests. We should be strengthening, through technology and workforce, our ability to fight these forest fires and to preserve our public lands and lives in our community. Mr. Bertone-Riggs, you mentioned the need for modernized approaches to wildfire, including emerging technology to fight fires that are faster, larger, more destructive. Can you speak more to how the decentralized approach of the agencies responsible for wildfire management has hindered the use of these existing and necessary technologies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. When the commission examined this issue of technology adoption, this was one of the places where they saw a very strong need for centralization of those efforts. I think as Mr. Triplett spoke to and could answer questions further, this is a space where it's difficult for the private sector to find a point of contact. It's difficult to pilot new technologies. It's also a problem of interoperability between different agencies. So this seemed like a place where the creation of what the commission termed a fire environment center, what House FOFA calls a fire shed center, and Senate FOFA calls a fire intelligence center, same concept, right? This is a place where we can have unified budgets, we can have more focus on the adoption of new technologies and dispersal of that technology.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I really see, as in so many sectors, technology as additive. We can't, there's not a lot of replacement of human beings in the firefighting world that is helpful, right? You need bodies to be out there in the wilderness fighting these fires. And, to my colleague's earlier point about the differentiation, visible differentiation between, in his example, public lands and private lands, we see a huge differentiation on the peninsula between DNR, state-managed forest lands, and federal lands, where DNR has been staffing up and increasing technology. We have seen cuts to already skeleton crew in our national forest staff that mean that they're not able to manage the forest lands with the same efficiency to optimal forest health the way that DNR is, and they're only seeing further cuts. Are the technologies, in your opinion, enough to fight the increased number of wildfires we're seeing? Or what do you think about the people with experience and fire-specific qualifications that we might need?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think we need to be careful to not think of technology as the only solution to these issues. It's a complex problem. It requires emphasis on mitigation work. That's in both the built and natural environment. It requires emphasis on post-fire recovery as well. Fire is not going anywhere anytime soon, and so that will continue to be a piece of it. Ultimately, appropriate staffing levels and appropriate budgets to meet those challenges are a key component of this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired, and I'll recognize the gentleman from Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I begin, I'll ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the Interior Secretary Burgum issue that the Ranking Member Neguse from Sky High News. Representative Neguse was accurate in his statement. However, what he didn't say, he didn't finish the comments by Elizabeth Peace, the Interior Department spokesperson, where she said, quote, "These staffing levels are consistent with prior years," end quote. And I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
So ordered.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tiffany. Chief Munsey, I have to tell you, I was a police officer in Duluth, Minnesota for 23 years. I loved our fire department. When there was a structure fire, I was glad we had hero firefighters to go in there because I don't think I had the courage to do it. But I can tell you, when we had structure fires, there was no automobile that was going over your hoses. I protected that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I tell you what, I appreciate your comments today. In one of the questions from the ranking members, basically you said we're going to use taxpayers' money wisely. We're going to reduce the fraud, waste, and abuse and get it to where it needs to go. I so much appreciate your comments. In early May, the Jenkins Creek Camp House and Mungershaw fire burned across northern Minnesota all at once, burning nearly 30,000 acres of federal, state, tribal, county, and private lands. Across these three fires, we clearly saw that the areas where proper forest management took place, or the areas where innovative technologies and strategies were deployed, fared much better and faced less destruction. Touring my district and seeing these devastating communities firsthand underscore the need to be innovative in our wildfire response, along with proper forest management to help avoid these fires in the first place. One cabin did not use the FireWise approach, burned to the ground. The other cabin used the FireWise approach, still standing. One of the technologies I was very impressed on was the use of the Watch Duty app, which I, along with my staff, first responders, and constituents used countless times during a day to track where the fires were burning, where the fires were moving, and which areas were in the greatest danger. This app uses real-time official and crowdsourcing source data and information, ultimately allowing my constituents to remain safe and allowing the firefighters and first responders to work smarter and with more efficiency. Just 5 years ago, the Watch Duty didn't exist. We didn't have this information at our fingertips. Now that we do today, communities across rural America are safer. This just underscores why we need to be more innovative, constantly changing and improving and deploying the best technology available. Ms. Wolff, the technology that your company, Vibrant Planet, has developed is similar to the Watch Duty app, as it provides land managers and first responders the latest information about the movement of fires along with potential risks, all in real time. Can you share what the alternative would be if we didn't have these technologies that provide real-time information? And how would we go about fighting wildfires if we didn't have that real-time information like you're presenting today?
Yes, thank you for the question. So we built our platform after one of my co-founders here in the room, Scott Conway, was running some of the collaborative processes that I showed where people are planning on paper. Sounds like that's happening more than I thought in the fire operations side as well. We observed dozens of these processes to understand how painful they are and ask the question, where can improved data, where can an application help you make more informed decisions much more quickly? I saw rooms full of people arguing with each other, not trusting each other, and where environmentalists were fighting, sometimes for good reason, to protect owl protected activity centers, right? They have no ability in those environments to game out where to go to get the most bang for the buck. And so that's what we've built, is a transparent, really rich information system where in real time they can collaborate together and understand where they even agree.
And get that technology out, as Chief Munsey said, get it out into the field and have it being used. Mr. Triplett, the recent wildfires in my district didn't respect property boundaries. They burned across our checkerboard of federal, state, tribal, county, and private lands. Accordingly, multiple different jurisdictions and countless different levels had to respond collaboratively. In your written testimony, you discuss how these various entities can work with shared resources, including the adoption and the use of the latest technology. This will clearly benefit the response at all levels. Local first responders and volunteer rescue squads in my district, unfortunately, cannot afford many of these technologies. How can the adoption of these new technologies be better resourced through the state and federal governments, and how can we improve the response by all parties working on wildfire response? You have 10 seconds.
Interagency cooperation. One of the things that excited me about Earthfire Alliance is, as a nonprofit, we're in this to support the boots on the ground, the local communities. It's the have and have-nots. My experience in fighting fires from Alaska to Florida, I saw very well-resourced areas, and I've worked with VFDs that had nothing. One of the things that we're really focused on is providing data equitably across jurisdictions. There's no boundaries for us, and we work together. I've worked with Chief Munsey when I was with the Forest Service to provide interoperable data sets so that all responders, all managers can get what they need to make that decision.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your testimony and your professionalism, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I'll recognize the gentle lady from New Mexico, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, for her questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. As we sit here today, nearly 1,400 brave firefighters are in New Mexico at the Trout Fire and New Mexico's Gila National Forest. You know, the Gila Wilderness was the country's first wilderness. It's a beautiful forest. 47,000 acres of forest right now are under fire. Twin Cabins Fire just started in my beautiful district. And this is all too familiar. As you all know, we are seeing an increase in wildfires across the West and across the entire country as we suffer through the droughts caused by climate change and our worsening planetary conditions. So traditional fire mitigation efforts, though, are important. Like, I believe that we need to engage in prescribed burns and pile burns, but we need to make sure they are done safe. As many of you know, in my district, we had the largest fire in New Mexico history that escaped from 2 prescribed burns. I requested a GAO study because I am willing, and Democrats are willing, to criticize a Democrat president and administration. And I wanted an independent analysis of what went wrong. And so the GAO did that study. We got an independent analysis. And indeed, in the GAO study and the Forest Service, they acknowledge we are not using the latest technologies when we do prescribed burns, but only when after the fire. Well, that doesn't make any sense because some prescribed burns get out. In fact, 46 prescribed burns have escaped their planned boundaries. So, Dr. Howard, how can the Forest Service better use infrared technology to help monitor prescribed burns?
Infrared technology can be mounted on a variety of platforms. On the ground, of course, cameras and sensors that can detect hotspots or smoldering areas, lightning strikes maybe very quickly, hopefully very quickly. If they're incorporated with AI, that AI can help speed the response that's coming in from a network of cameras or sensors. So that's one way.
Yeah. Thank you, and I think that's really important to explore all the different ways. And I also want to do a shout out to the GAO for the work you did for us. You respond, whether it's a Republican asking a question or a Democrat asking a question, you respond to us. And you provide us with nonpartisan, what are the facts, what's the science, let's look into it, let's make sure we address fraud, we address how to make government work better. Did I kind of accurately describe how you see your mission?
You certainly did, and that's a mission that we're very, very proud of.
Well, I am very proud of your mission as well, and I am just incredibly disappointed that the Republicans in their appropriations have cut the GAO by 50%. The Republican Party, who says that it's about addressing race, fraud, and abuse, is getting rid of by half the agency that we rely on, both Republicans and Democrats, to help us make sure our government works better and that we eliminate race, fraud, and abuse. But I wanted to turn to Mr. Bertone-Riggs and looking at the Trump's 26 budget for the U.S. Forest Service. Do you think it makes the necessary investments in new technologies and staff to address the wildfire crisis?
I think it's a little hard to say. In looking at the budgets, there is a proposal to consolidate Wildland Fire Service into the Department of the Interior. There is a budget line item in the budget in brief that includes a Science and Technology Directorate within that new agency. I think until we have further details within the budget, it's hard to know exactly how that would map over. But again, I think fundamentally, and to the point of my testimony, this will require funding. Setting that funding level appropriately is important, but it will require funding for new technology.
Right. So wherever you put the firefighting capacity, you have to fund both the technology and the boots on the ground. I mean, because you do not fight fires without paying the personnel and making sure you have adequate personnel and adequate technology, because that's how we keep our community safe. That's how we keep our firefighters safe. And we cannot do any of this with a starvation budget that we have seen proposed by the Trump administration. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The lady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Bentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. Mr. Chair, I offer for inclusion in the record this article, the Smoky Wire National Forest News and Views.
Without objection, so ordered.
This document addresses some of the remarks that have been made by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about reductions in the Forest Service. The title of this particular article is Forest Service Employment Numbers Did the Forest Service add 20% more permanent employees in the last 2 years? This is dated March 10th of this year, and the answer is yes, yes, it did. 20% more permanent employees. So I'm going to read this. So in 2 years, 2023 and 2024, the Forest Service added 5,860 permanent positions, of which 1,430 were in fire. And so if we take 28,500, the average, would that be permanent employees? Would that be a 20% increase of permanent employees at the Forest Service in the last 2 years? And the answer is yes. And so I make this point because I'm becoming tired and of the tedious remarks about gutting the agency when in point of fact that's not true. And what's happening is there's a focused effort to confuse people over the nature of permanent employees on the one hand versus temporary on the other. Just to find out though what's really going on, I had my staff reach out to the Bureau of Land Management back in Oregon where I'm from. I have a 70,000 square mile district. So it's very important to me that the BLM and the Forest Service be appropriately staffed. Here's what they said. The BLM ensures my staff that the agency is fully operational and ready for a robust fire season in Oregon. The BLM said they are allowed to hire appropriate staff for all firefighting needs. They are currently hiring staff for the upcoming fire season and are confident that they have the appropriate staff. And we also reached out to the U.S. Forest Service, and they are also sure that they have the proper level of employees, which is as high or higher than last year. They're still actively hiring and have had a surge of local individuals applying for wildfire fighting positions. And finally, I spoke to them myself when I went back to my district 2 weeks ago, and I asked flat out, both the BLM and the Forest Service in the largest populated area in my district, do you need more help? And the answer was no. So I'm impatient with the misplaced focus on staffing when we should be talking about what in the world can we do about what's making these fires so hot. So to that end, I'm going to ask Ms. Wolff, the devices that you have available, you say, are available to measure risk. And it seems to me that we all agree that the risk is higher because things are drier, but also because of the enormous stack up and accumulation of fuel in our forests, the incredible amount of fuel. So while we see people running around screaming about not having enough people to fight the fire, they seem to be completely ignoring the increase in the temperature by virtue of failing to manage our forests, which Congressman McClintock referenced. Does your approach, your technological approach, allow you to call out where people should be the most concerned about being burned up? Does your technology do that?
It does. Our system is powered by a company that we joined forces with called Pyrologics. They're the most advanced fire scientists in the country. We're able to see at a very fine scale across communities where more defensible space is needed, in the wild-urban interface, and then out in wildlands, how fire behavior might happen, how fire might move into a community. We call that pyrocity.
Let me ask this question, because I have a nephew in the insurance business, and of course it's becoming extremely difficult in these fire-prone areas to find fire insurance for obvious reasons. Yes. Does your technology enable cities to identify where the risk is and then reduce it?
It does, and you're right. In many places in the country, we have 2 to 10 times the number of trees that were historically there. Our forests in the West are hazardously overgrown, and there are places where we can help remove timber for the American Timber Executive Order that Mr. Trump pushed out recently, and we can also reduce fire risk. In many places, those things don't overlap, and we do have to reduce fuels.
So let me ask a somewhat politically motivated question, because as you apply your technology to the landscape, you would be able to call out where fuel has been added to by all kinds of mismanaged situations. And what I've been trying to do is call out the environmental organizations that have filed lawsuits to prevent us from going into the forest and removing the fuel. So your technology would allow us to say, oh yes, there was a forest plan, an offered sale that was then litigated, and we couldn't remove the fuel, your technology would show how much fuel was not removed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you could give us, how far back can you go? Because obviously we'd like to be able to show what's really happening on the ground, which is an insane amount of added fuel every year. How far back can you go?
Well, the Landsat technology goes back 30 years. We typically look 5 years in arrears to look at the treatments that have happened or have not happened. And we can look at risk projection based on historic, but also forecasted risk projections. And they are really critical. We're intersecting with insurance, where we can show the pre and post risk profile change of an HOA, of a high-value asset, when treatment happens. And we're working with innovative insurers to actually get communities insurance at a normal price and make sure it's available. It is a big problem.
But another thing that I hope you're doing is reaching out to the cities and the county leaders and saying, look, we happen to have this report and it shows you're in serious danger, big time danger, do something about it. And that's what just happened in my district. Thank goodness we've had some fire barriers made around our various cities. Thank you so much for being here. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I'll recognize Ms. Stansberry for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Chief, to you and to all of our firefighters and first responders who are out there on the ground right now. There are literally thousands of brave men and women who are fighting fires across the country as we sit here in this hearing room, and we want to say thank you for your service. Right now in New Mexico, as my colleague from New Mexico mentioned, there are thousands of acres that are burning up as we speak. We've got a fire in Mescalero in southern New Mexico, a massive fire in the Gila Mountains, a fire just broke out in the Jemez Mountains. We've got a fire in the Bosque in Valencia County in Las Lunas in my district, and massive flooding in Ruidoso and Mescalero. And we have communities up north that are still recovering in Mora from the largest fires in New Mexico history. And it's very clear. If you live out west right now, it's very clear. Fires are getting bigger, more intense, more difficult to contain, and we need good science, technology, tools, and human bodies on the ground to be able to prevent, plan for, and respond to these fires. And so I'm grateful to have a bipartisan hearing on this issue, because it's just going to keep getting worse. And Chief Munsey, I was struck in your testimony, you talked about, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, that most people would be surprised to know that our firefighters don't have the same tools at their disposal that many in the American public are used to having just on their phones, in terms of being able to geolocate things, to understand what's happening in real time. Talk to us a little bit more about what tools do you think would help dramatically increase the safety and ability of firefighters on the ground to respond?
I addressed a lot of those in my written testimony and my comments earlier, so I'd like to redirect on what is the processes need to be changed, what's the bureaucracy that needs to drop, what's the leadership that's involved to get these tools to the firefighters. Again, we need common operating pictures across all agencies for planning to prevent the bad stuff from happening. And then when the response occurs, we need to have an efficient response. We need to use all available detection technologies. We need to have private-public partnerships. Today, California State, CAL FIRE, does an amazing job with wildfire, heads and tails better than the U.S. Forest Service or BLM. Today, local government is far exceeding the federal government on the technology that's adopted. Again, I pay for the Angeles National Forest and the San Bernardino National Forest to use a common operating picture called Intera so that they can show where their units are in relationship to this national disaster. Without that, those are the only two forests in the nation that have the technology. They would not have that technology. They can't purchase it, back to what I said. The purchasing, the bureaucracy, the lack of interagency adoption of technology, this needs to be centralized. There needs to be leadership that opens the doors, that allows our firefighters to have the tools that they need, the tools that they have at home while they're on the job.
I could not agree more, absolutely. And I think that speaks to interagency coordination, interoperability of these systems. A lot of people don't realize that our first response systems don't even talk to each other. So this is something I've been very passionate for years. My background as a water resources manager, it's why I have a bipartisan water data bill. It's why the federal government plays a key role in helping to provide the monitoring systems, the coordination. As you're stating, local governments are far ahead in some cases they're not. And Dr. Howard, looking at the GAO's report on this, I'm struck by, many people don't realize that the data collection and systems that support the kinds of tools that the chief are talking about come from a wide range of different agencies. We're talking NOAA, we're talking even military resources are used, satellites, as well as USGS. And so I guess what is particularly strange to me is that we're having a bipartisan hearing, we're hearing from folks on the ground, and we have a proposed budget that's literally working its way through Congress that eviscerates the monitoring, science, research, and technology development programs that would develop these tools. Could you talk about why it's important to fund those programs and how, based on GAO studies, we can make them more interoperable and help support local entities on the ground?
We do know that we need data from a variety of sources, and unfortunately, they do not always talk to each other. They're not always interoperable. They often are collected in different formats. They're stored in different formats, and it takes a lot of time and often a lot of expense to get the AI ready so they can be used together in a model. So that's one of the data gaps we have that hinders the advancement of these tools, these sorts of tools. We do firmly agree that the technologies do not operate in a vacuum, that there is an entire system in place around them. So you could have a beautiful tool that tells you where hazardous fuel reduction will be most effective, but if the agencies, both at the federal, state, local, tribal levels, don't have the resources to conduct that hazardous fuels reduction, the model doesn't do you a lot of good. And the same is true for early detection. If a model spots a wildfire, but the resources are elsewhere, or there aren't sufficient firefighters to respond to that early detection, then it hasn't done us a lot of good.
Thank you very much. And I'll just say, we're talking artificial intelligence, satellites, remote sensing programs, drones, dashboards, geospatial data, 5G, quantum sensing, large computer systems, modeling. Guess what? All of that is funded by the United States government. And unfortunately, the FY26 budget, which our colleagues are working on marking up right now, guts many of those programs. So if we want our firefighters to be safe, if we want people to be able to communicate, if we want to be able to respond to fires, don't cut the budget. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired, and I'll recognize the gentleman from Montana for his questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to wave onto this committee for this important conversation. I spent the 4 years prior to being here as a member of the Montana Board of Land Commissioners, so as a land commissioner, dealing with, we've got about 5.5 million acres, state trust land, a lot of that forested, and seeing what, positive management can do to mitigate a lot of problems, and seeing the need to have some good tools on the federal side of that equation. Obviously, we have a lot of federal lands in Montana as well. I also spent the last 4 years as the insurance commissioner, and it was interesting to me to see how many companies, how many startups, different ideas came in about mitigation services using everything from artificial intelligence to, drones, machine learning, satellite imagery, all of this stuff to try to, solve these problems. And so I've got, a little bit of a unique perspective on both sides of this. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to discuss how the Fix Our Forests Act will equip us with the latest technologies to help us detect fires sooner, to manage fuels more effectively, and share data faster with partners on the ground. In a state like Montana, where our public lands and dry conditions make every second count, I've seen this firsthand. This is the kind of innovation that saves lives. And I'm going to start with Ms. Wolff here. How can technologies like drones, artificial intelligence, satellite imagery help us shift from a reactive to a proactive model in wildfire prevention and forest management?
So we're doing that today at Vibrant Planet using LiDAR, remote sense satellite imagery, the Department of Agriculture NAEP program, to build a very fine scale vegetation structure in 3D that we can keep current using satellite imagery. So that is very operable in the decision support system that we support with that data to make tree-level decisions around homes in the wild-urban interface and wildlands. We do need more funding for the preventive side. So I think the intent of the Fix Our Forests Act bill is awesome. But I think I'm deeply concerned about having enough money go to communities. The community wildfire defense grants have been game-changing. Some of the FEMA hazard mitigation grants have also been game-changing. So I am concerned about the lack of federal funding going to communities to actually support the really crucial risk mitigation that they need to do.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Mr. Triplett. The Fix Our Forest Act would create fireshed management areas and establish a fireshed center to improve fire risk assessments and planning using geospatial tools. How can this kind of data-driven approach improve how federal agencies prioritize high-risk areas and deploy resources more effectively?
Thanks for the question. So the proposal for a Fireshed Center and/or a Fire Intelligence Center would bring together the fractured, broken intelligence and data systems that we have currently deployed across the country. You have 50 states, 5 federal agencies, 2 federal departments, all collecting data, trying to do the best they can to manage resources for response. There's no central hub where all that comes together right now. It's an incredible workload. Most of the data is not interoperable. And there's a lot of time and effort, human time, that goes in to bring that together.
Thank you.
Pulling that Fire Intelligence Center together brings that all together.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And move to Chief Munsey. Many of these new tools depend on fast, reliable connectivity, as we've just heard. How can expanding 5G and cloud-based systems help support remote wildfire monitoring and improve firefighter communications on the ground?
Yes, sir. Connectivity is king. 5G is part of the ecosystem of that connectivity. We look at redundancy. We look at mesh networks. And we look at edge computing to reduce the latency and the amount of information that's being transmitted. All those things are important to cloud computing. To the point of Dr. Howard, is that we siloed information. Not only interagency, but we rely on third-party companies that store our information. We need to move into a public safety cloud environment that will allow us to create better interoperability.
Thank you. Moving to Dr. Howard. What are some of the main oversight or implementation challenges that agencies may face when adopting new wildfire-related technologies? And how can Congress help ensure taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently while still encouraging innovation?
I think one of the things we haven't talked about much in this hearing yet is some of the things that would improve the technologies themselves. So we talk about the potential and the promise, and certainly that potential is there, but there are also limitations. We need to train on the very best data, and that means we need to have better data sharing and we need to have data standardization that everybody can follow so those data are compatible. We need to test the models in real operational scenarios so that not only we know they're accurate and they work, but the people on the ground can trust them and they know where they're most effective and when those models might not be the best choice and they should use a different tool instead. We need to train firefighters and communities in which models to choose and why, and when, again, they should use other resources. And we need to make training a priority for firefighters on the ground so that they can understand the tools. If we send them into a fire with their years of expertise and a new tool that they don't really understand very well, they're more likely to lean on their own expertise and not on the tool, no matter what our research might show us about the advantages of that tool.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I've run out of time. Thank you to the witnesses. And Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to wave on. And with that, I yield.
Gentlemen's time has expired, and thank you for joining the committee today. Next, let's go to Dr. Howard to follow up with the representative from Montana. You cited a recommendation in your testimony from the GAO to better measure hazardous fuels programs. What does that recommendation say?
That recommendation was dealing with the idea that everybody wants to do hazardous fuels reduction in the most effective manner. Science shows that it is helpful to do hazardous fuels reduction, but there are better ways to target that, and hopefully some of these new tools can help us with that a little bit. But the recommendation addressed the fact that it's often expedient to measure hazardous fuels reduction in the number of acres cleared or treated in whatever format that might take. that can at times encourage those doing the hazardous fuels reduction to take the easy road and clear the areas that are easiest and quickest so they can rack up acres, rather than the ones that might have the most benefit in forestalling damage from a fire.
So in other words, this may dovetail into the bill that I have, the Acres Act, that accurately counting acres, that it's important that we do that. Was that something you would agree with?
I think what the recommendation says is that the Forest Service and others need to reevaluate the outcomes that they're using for their hazardous fuels program and figure out whether they're achieving their actual goals, which is a reduction of fire risk.
I appreciate that very much. I appreciate what Chief Munsey said earlier, and he repeated that we don't have a wildfire problem in America. We've got a land management problem. And I would like to just point to all of you this chart that we use regularly here in this committee. I use regularly. It is a fact that I believe 1988 was a watershed year. That is when the United States of America, the federal government, decided to no longer harvest the appropriate amount of timber off from our national forest lands, whether it's U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, whatever. And you can see the direct correlation where the green goes down in terms of the amount of trees harvested, and the number of wildfires has steadily gone up since then. Representative McClintock said it very well. The U.S. Forest Service used to put money in the United States Treasury, and now we're having to pay for hazardous fuels reduction because we're not managing our forests. And I don't know if you care to comment, Mr. Triplett, but I believe, so I was in Yosemite a couple years ago as a guest of Mr. McClintock, and he talked about there's 200 fewer mills across the Sierras that can take that harvested wood and turn it into 2x4s and other wood products. Isn't that part of our problem here, is that now we're missing some of the mill infrastructure that is gone, especially in the West?
I would agree that there is a lot less mills out there. However, that is really not my background. I'm a technology guy, but I can tell you just in the state of Idaho where I live, we've seen a significant reduction in the number of mills. And I think what's really critical there is when you do timber harvesting, the amount of travel that it takes to get the timber to the mill starts to make it less cost effective and profitable for our timber companies. So reduction in mills reduces the amount of timber harvest and folks interested in actually doing that because of the cost.
Yeah, I haven't seen the number across the United States of America, but I know it's happened up in my district too, in northern Wisconsin, where we have fewer mills. And we're now seeing our managed forest law program in the state of Wisconsin being in jeopardy of landowners being able to fulfill their requirements because they don't have enough sources, places to send that wood. And it is critical that we rebuild mills, that we have mills and factories here in America to be able to accept that wood if we're going to be able to do proper management. Ms. Wolff, can you talk about how the technology adoption of stuff like you guys are doing at Vibrant Planet, how that can help avoid some of these litigation expenses? Because it's clear, litigation has been one of the major drivers in the increase of wildfire, especially in the western states.
Yeah, so our platform was designed to help with collaborative scenario planning, where a nonprofit looking out for special interests, a Forest Service fuels team, a fire management agency can work together to develop scenarios and actually see, like I said, where they actually have agreement. And so we can do what's practical and put the dollars in the highest ROI places, highest return of investment places that balance the need to get American timber out of our forests. The fuels, we can do ecological treatments that pull smaller trees and down branches and things like that out. Those things can go into really innovative wood utilization industries like cross-laminated timber and biochar and syngas, things like that. So we can help avoid litigation and some of the conflict in these slow, arduous processes by bringing these transparent data into an application, and literally in real time, people can weigh trade-offs of this plan versus this plan, and come to agreement much faster. It's been really incredible to watch the efficiency to get to consensus.
I think you cited 300 cities are at extreme risk at this point. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm assuming that message is getting out to those cities and whatever. Are any of them reacting? And are people at the local, state, and federal level, are they reacting to this?
They are reacting. We're just starting to roll out some of that news. The cities are slow to react. Part of the problem is funding, I will say. Like I said, the dwindling Community Wildfire Defense Grant funding, it has been deployed, and there's not secured funding yet. Hopefully in appropriations this year, we'll see more funding behind Fix Our Forest Act for communities from the federal government, and then also more legislation like California has done where I live, to put state money in alongside the federal government to get this work done. It's really critical.
So insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results. And that's what we've been doing now since 1988. I mean, we just continue. So when I hear the criticism from the other side, I don't think there's anything wrong with us taking a new approach, perhaps reallocating money in different ways, and hopefully getting more of it from sitting here in a bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., and getting it to the front lines. And I think that's what this administration is attempting to do. And talking about the creation of new technology or whatever, that's going to come from the private sector, from people like you. I mean, that is where it is going to come from, and we need our agencies to adopt that technology. They're not going to create it. They need to do that. And rather than asking for more dollars, I mean, at the end of the day, we're $37 trillion in debt. I mean, you got to deal with this at some point. And to just say that we need to throw more money at the problem is just not the answer. We need to more effectively use those dollars. And that's why I'm so appreciative of the message that all of you have brought here today, that there's another way to go about it. And I actually am very optimistic about fire in the West, and that we are going to, there is a realization that I think cuts across political lines, that we have to do things in a different way, and I appreciate all of you delivering that message.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if you would entertain a point of order quickly?
Sure.
So with regards to the chart, my background is in watershed science and management. I think this is not apples and oranges, and I think the comments, or these are apples and oranges, excuse me.
Could you tell us what the point of order is?
Yeah, the point of order is that this chart that you're talking about is misleading, because timber sales are largely large diameter timber, and that is due to export markets. But most of what
it doesn't sound like a point of order. It sounds like a debate, and we're happy to have that debate anytime.
What fuels fires is hazardous fuels, which is small diameter. I agree that we do need more timber mills in the West to deal with small diameter.
So
but every
this is not
fire
a point of order.
scientist, every watershed scientist in America understands that this
is not a point of
fallacy,
order.
sir,
I now
and you're
recognize
presenting
the
false
gentleman from
information in the
Utah,
hearing.
Mr. Kennedy,
Thank
for your
you very
5
much.
minutes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening this, and thanks to the witnesses. We know you've sat here for a long time, and we appreciate your willingness to come and share your expertise. In fact, right now, Mr. Chair, there's a forest fire burning right near my city in Utah, and of course, we all should take this seriously, not only for our own personal, but the national interests. We know that several federal land management agencies in Utah, including the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service, all have experienced increasingly severe wildfire seasons. In 2024 alone, Utah saw a 54% increase in wildfire incidents. The number is 1,244 fires. The acreage burned more than doubled from about 18,000 acres in 2023 to 40,000 acres in 2024. We in Utah are very supportive of the Fix Our Forest Act, which will help us protect watersheds and reduce wildfire risk. The state of Utah is united in working to enhance Utah's wildfire preparedness and improve coordination among state, local, and federal partners ahead of the 2025 fire season. I look forward to working with all the stakeholders involved and to make sure that the federal government is closely coordinating with the state, using the best technologies that are available to improve our forest management and quickly suppress fires when they start. I've introduced the Utah Wildfire Research Institute Act of 2025, which will create a federal wildfire research institute at Utah State University, which has already spent money to stand this institute up, and I'm excited about that. And this institute will be dedicated to studying wildfire ecology and developing innovative solutions to mitigate wildfire risk. The institute will partner with local, state, and federal agencies to enhance forest and rangeland management and implement strategies for long-term ecological restoration. I have a question first for Mr. Triplett. Thank you very much for being here, but can you tell me a little bit about how federal wildfire research institutes are helping to advance the innovative technologies we've talked about today in this committee?
Yes, thanks for the question. The science and technology that we're discussing here, a lot of the foundation and backbone that they used to develop that came out of those research institutes, not just Forest Service research institutes. One of the amazing things about the wildfire community is a collaborative effort between the federal, state, local, and universities. I think that is the way that we need to move forward and continue to foster those relationships. Those institutes have access to resources that one single agency doesn't have. When you bring that power together, you're bringing in different minds and diverse perspectives. It's also a great sounding board and test bed for new technologies. You're having the best and brightest minds bring a technology in to see if it's of value to the firefighter on the ground, to the land manager, and then move that from that critical piece, which is research, to operations.
Thank you for saying that. One of the things that I think it may be analogous, and of course, war is a terrible travesty, and we see Russia and Ukraine embarking on a war. But what I've heard about in preparation for this meeting, I was reading about the drone usage that we can consider as we apply that to wildfire. And we see that in the war associated with Ukraine and Russia, that they're using drones in a way that we've never seen before in war. And the idea that when we fight a fire, it is like fighting a war. It's an uncontrollable circumstance that we need to leverage all ideas, all technologies, all capacity to try to contain and prepare for our future. So, Ms. Wolff, I had a question for you, if you don't mind entertaining that. How can the private sector work with wildfire research institutes to speed up the development and deployment of these critical technologies?
Yeah, so per your DoD example, I think we need to have more of a relationship with the natural resource agencies and the R&D centers within to bring the best of the public sector, the incredible research and development that can happen inside agencies like NASA and Department of Ag, together with the best of the private sector. So one of the things that I saw as a tech leader coming into this space was that it's really tough for the agencies to bring in the advanced machine learning and AI and some of the other technologies that we use to develop an easy-to-use product. It's really good design, things like that. That's where we can partner with the public sector to co-create the solutions that the people on the ground need to be using in the field to determine where do we have timber that we can pull out, and where do we have hazardous fuels that we need to pull out. And we need to do all of that ecologically so that we avoid lawsuits and the slowdowns that can happen without that data transparency and that ability to game out in real time that our system enables to really understand the trade-offs of different types of treatments. So I think it's a huge opportunity for more partnership, but I think the agencies need more of a nudge, I think, from Congress and permission to really partner with the private sector. It's happened in the defense part of our government. It has not really happened. That kind of public-private partnership has not been encouraged inside the natural resource agencies, and we are very hungry for that.
Thank you very much for that and all of your innovative efforts to try to attack this really important enemy of ours that are wildfires. In fact, we can debate here, and we do debate here vigorously, on how we accomplish the goal, but I don't think there's anybody in Congress that would argue in favor of wildfires that are destroying not only our beautiful natural lands, but also our citizens' homes and even threatening and sometimes taking their lives. So we're all united in that goal. How we do it is debatable. But Mr. Chair, thank you very much for convening this, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I'll recognize the gentleman from Arizona for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman for holding this open. I'm sorry I don't but I am today. But as the fires burn in the west, including 10 active fires in Arizona, the need for immediate improvements in our land management policies is abundantly clear. So I'm pleased to be an original co-sponsor of the Fix Our Forests Act, which requires mitigation strategies such as brush thinning and what. But investments in wildfire prevention must be forward-thinking and with the American people in mind. There's an alarming lack of coordination in threat reduction and wildlife response. So I hope this hearing can help steer that way, and I hope I did. I didn't get to see all of it. Now, just to give you an example of that, I was originally from Flagstaff. We had nothing going on in Arizona until Flagstaff almost burned down. That's what it took, and that's wrong. That's totally wrong. So Chief Munsey, in Arizona, extensive amounts of natural fuel make it difficult for homeowners to obtain fire insurance policies. So what happens, I'll give you an example. One of the people I know called me and said, listen, my insurance went up 10 times. I can't afford this. And it's not my property that's being impugned. It's the Forest Service around me. So question, what successful fuel reduction activities have you undertaken in your county?
You know, we talk about the Palisades and the Eaton. We refer to them as wildland fires, and they're actually not wildland fires. They're urban conflagrations. And I think there's going to be a lot of studying in those fires, but I think we're errant in that. We need to be studying the Bridge Fire that was in the Angels National Forest and the Line Fire. Both of those fires burned until they reached fuel treatment areas, fuel breaks that were created, and then the fire became low-intensity fires and allowed the firefighters to pick up. The Bridge Fire is probably the most important fire to study, as that the Angels National Forest had plans to create fuel breaks, had the money in their budget for almost a decade, but was held up due to bureaucracy and litigation, could not spend that money. Because of the money in their budget, they couldn't get more money for fuel projects. And that fuel project wasn't completed, which led to further damage during the Eaton fire. So I think it's really important we study those successes. We send our crews for free onto federal land to support the fuel treatment areas. Most recently, we put our fuel crews into the Lido Creek area to assist with a 7-mile, 300-foot wide fuel break around that community, recognizing it's important. Locally, we work with homeowners. We use the Good Neighbor Act that we clear hazardous fuels around homes. And we are working in a collaborative fashion between the federal government, the state government, tribal, local, and developing a comprehensive land management plan that agrees on the priorities and then identifies the regulatory environment we need to move through, and then identifies where should we put the money to get the most bang for the buck, and then what does the maintenance look like. That is the future of how local government interacts with the state and federal governments to help meet our land management needs.
So, Chief Munsey, so maybe consolidation of the checkerboard out west might be a very nice start to that aspect.
Sir, that's I think one of the concerns that I have. I've mentioned several times to support the U.S. Wildfire Agency, but as we remove the wildland firefighters from those land managers and form the ARM agency, the land management is still critically important. The wildfire firefighters need to have input on that land management. Land managers will sometimes protect species, while firefighters are going to be looking at how do we prevent fires from happening. The checkerboard makes it very difficult for us to create projects. And then not only the land management, but I've mentioned before here that you have the forest supervisors that make their own decisions and apply their policies as they see it on their own forests. And then you have overlays like the EPA in California, the AQMD, that prevent us from doing things like good fire. There needs to be somebody in charge that's working for President Trump that is making sure that his executive orders are being followed so that we can reduce the fuel danger and manage our land correctly so that we can get to a common sense approach of not having these wildland fires.
Well, and there's so much of the stuff that is value. So for example, maybe a thought process as a homeowner, if you are, you make a criteria of how a homeowner should be looking at their lot. And if they get that, they take maybe $1,000 off their taxes or something like that. Maybe something, a tax incentive that they are rewarded for, okay? That might be something. The other thing is we have to start looking at forests a little differently because as you know, young lady, that ponderosa forests are very different than pine forests. So we've got to approach them a little bit differently. And I'm finally starting to see this change in Arizona because the mindset has to change in Arizona and it has to change across this country. Chief, thank you very much. Appreciate you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Before we close here, I just One last question for Ms. Wolff. And Will, if you would put that slide up again, please, that we had earlier. Talk about the mitigation. I want you to get a little bit deeper into the mitigation efforts that could have been done in Altadena. Because you said for $9 million of prevention, we could have saved 40, I think you said billion dollars, is that right?
That's right.
Go a little bit more in depth on what you're saying in regards to that.
Yeah, so this is where there's huge efficiency in targeted treatment. So it's where technology can be used to look at what context are we in, what type of vegetation are we dealing with. There's different forests perform differently in fire, shrublands, grasslands, et cetera. So being able to map at a very fine scale what the vegetation structure is, and then to design targeted treatments that are taking precious dollars, because there's always precious dollars, and putting them where they matter most is really, really important. And so in this model, the green areas, the bright green areas in this map, that is a likely treatment mix that we developed post-fire. Again, we used the same weather that day, the accurate fuels and vegetation models that we have to look at if the treatments had happened before the fire broke out, would they have made a difference, right? So this is things like defensible space around homes, prioritizing that, mechanical thinning of forest or other vegetation, mastication of shrublands and grasslands. So it's really targeted in this case along that wild-urban interface between the Angeles National Forest, where the fire broke out, and the community itself. And so that, as I said, having fewer fuels along that area would have slowed the fire down. It would have eventually burned as it did into the community, but it would have slowed the fire down enough so that people like Chief Munsey can get in there and more safely fight that fire to actually set up a successful defense. And that also potentially creates more efficiencies in the fire suppression side as well. And obviously firefighter safety is paramount. So hopefully, is that the detail that you're looking for? Can I answer anything else?
Yeah, for sure. And this isn't just, I'm assuming this isn't just Monday morning quarterbacking. You believe that if these mitigation efforts were done, you have a high confidence that it would have bought some time at a minimum?
Absolutely. To more successfully evacuate and then defend the community.
Yeah, well, this is why we had this hearing today. It's just really fascinating what we can do with technology, and not just one technology. I think, as you cited, Dr. Howard, is going to solve the problem. But if we use them all in conjunction, I think we have a great chance for success. Thank you to all of you for your valuable testimony, and members for your questions. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for our witnesses today, and we'll ask that you respond to those in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the subcommittee must submit questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for those responses. If there is no further business, without objection, the Subcommittee on Federal Lands stands adjourned.